So I did a massive 20 bottle blind of some of the best bottles that came out in 2023. What big name bottles missed the cut? Some big ones did. Stay tuned to find out. Welcome back to the Bourbon Retriever. Today we're going to talk about my ranking for the top bourbons that came out in 2023. This is probably one, if not two, of my favorite videos that I'm going to be able to make this year. Being able to drink some of the best bottles that came out this year in a massive blind is just an absolute treat. However, I don't think I have fully appreciated how difficult it was going to be, because these bottles across the board are just absolute hitters. So I've done blinds plenty of times before, 4, 5, 8, even maybe up to 10-way blinds, but I've never done something on this scale. So I came up with a process to help narrow down the list. The blind ended up being a 2-day affair. The first round was I took all the bottles and separated them into 2 groups randomly. They weren't sorted based on distillery, proof, price, or anything like that. Just randomly put them into 2 separate groups, which ended up being about 12 bottles or so. From that, I ranked the top 8 bottles, and those were the ones that were going to move on. I thought about only moving on 5 from each bracket to make your top 10. However, since they were randomly assigned into 2 groups, I was a little worried maybe one set might have more hitters than the other, so I made it 8 just to give a little bit of wiggle room. So in the next round, I took the 8 that advanced on from each group to make the top 16, and I whittled it down to the top 5. From there, I ranked the 16 through 11, and then this is the first area where I actually have a ranking for bottles. Before this, it was just the bottles didn't make it on to the top 16. Once I had set my top 5 list, I went back and rated 6 through 10. And then in the final round, I ranked my top 5 again. And then once I felt comfortable with my order, I had my friend Taylor go through and randomly pick them up. I wore a blindfold so I couldn't see which letter they were, and I drank them. I guess maybe you say this is double blind or triple blind, and reordered them then that way. Before we get into the results, I want to thank a couple people. First, Taylor Folds. I couldn't do this list without him. Many of these bottles are $200 plus bottles, and I couldn't have bought all these on my own. So we ended up splitting this. I bought about half, he bought about half, and it ended up together creating a very robust list. I think there's maybe only a couple LEs we're missing, like maybe a birthday bourbon, a Russell's 13, and then a lot of the BTACs, even though there is one BTAC in this list. And then lastly, and most importantly, I'd like to thank Jenny Garman. She is the one who went through and took all our bottles and poured them blind for me and Taylor to try. Without her, we couldn't have done this because me and Taylor, we could have poured them blind for each other, but it would have been hard to actually match up the same bottle for us to compare notes. So thank you, Jenny. We could not have done this without you. All right, let's go ahead and start talking about the bottles. I'm going to first talk about the ones that weren't ranked. So these are the bottles that in the first round got cut from 12 to 8 from each group. These bottles are in no particular order, but the first one I'll talk about is Knob Creek 18. It's an absolute fantastic bottle, coming in at an 18-year age statement, which is becoming harder and harder to find in the bourbon industry. And coming in at 100 proof, it packs a nice amount of flavor. I will say for most people, I would recommend you buying the 12. I think the 12 is a much better value. So while if you buy this, I don't think you'll be disappointed. I think the better value though is in the 12 year. Next on this list is the Yellowstone 2023 LE finished in Tokaji cast. I think this is going to start showing my preferences a little bit here. I'm not a big finish fan. I think a lot of times it just imparts these artificial or off-profile flavors to bourbon, which I personally just don't very much enjoy. And while it's a fine bottle at $100, I think there's some bottles on this list that are much better values. Okay, next on the list is the Old Fitz 10 Spring Edition 2023. The Old Fitz is probably the prettiest bottle on the market. However, when it comes to the juice inside, it is just a nice average pour. There's nothing special about it, but for something that's coming in at the price point of Old Fitz's, along with just how hard they're to get, I think you're much better off buying other bottles, including one liter that is very high on this list. The next bottle we're going to talk about is the Gatsby Reserve. Coming in at 15 years old, it is cask strength, and one of the cool things about this bottle is that cask strength, it is sub 100 proof, which is just something you don't really see in the marketplace. I absolutely love this bottle. I think it is better than last year's batch. Similar to the Knob Creek 18, I think this is also better than the 2022. However, I think what put the Gatsby down is the proof. it's just really difficult for it to compete with other bottles on this list. But it's a bottle I'm not disappointed in owning just because of the uniqueness of it, but at the end of the day, it just didn't stand up to the other bottles. Okay, next one is the JD10. I didn't think this one would do too well. I thought this would be kicked out because to me, it doesn't drink like a special pour. This to me should be an everyday shelf bottle. It's a very nice bottle, easy drinking, good notes on it. However, there's just nothing that unique or special about it. So while I really enjoy it and I'm glad this bottle came out this year, I fully expected it not to actually make the top 10. The next two bottles I'm probably gonna get the most hate for. And the first one I will talk about here is the 13th Colony Cask Strength Double Oaked 2023 edition. I know there's been some controversy over the 13th Colony Double Oak lately, but that is not the reason it didn't make the top 10. This was my first time trying batch 2. I had batch 1 last year and was absolutely in love. I think it was one of the top 3 bottles that I tried last year. And while I really loved drinking the sample of batch 2, it just didn't live up to my memory of batch 1. I really enjoyed the aroma and the front half of the palate. However, once it got to the mid palate to late, it was just fire in my mouth. The proof took over and I wasn't able to get a lot of flavor. And when you're talking about the top 10 bottles of the year, it has to almost be a perfect drink from the aroma to the front palate, mid palate, and finish. And the day I did the blind, the 13th Colony just did not live up to it. The last bottle that did not make it into the ranking is the 2023 George T. Stagg. The Buffalo Antique Collection, including the George T. Stagg, are some of the most sought after bottles in the market. I think retail on these are roughly around $125, $150. Secondary on them is much higher, closer to $800. Similar to the 13th Colony, I had George T. Stagg last year, the 2022 version, and it was my favorite pour of 2022. And what was even better about that George T. Stagg was the price. I was able to get a 1/2 ounce pour of George T. Stagg 2022 for $20, which is just unheard of in the DC market. So when I was given the opportunity to buy a full bottle of the 2023 George T. Stagg, I couldn't even tell you the excitement. This is the first BTAC I've been able to own, but when I popped it and drank it with my friends, it just didn't live up to the hype this year. The aroma and the front end of the palate are very nice, traditional Buffalo Trace notes. However, where this bottle just falls apart for me is in the back half of the palate. The back half of the palate just turns into this lemongrass note, which is a note I typically get on younger bourbons. So when I got it on this George T. Stagg, which is 15 years plus, I was a little disappointed. I'm not the only one to get this note. I've sampled this bottle out to 3 other people and they all had the exact same reaction. So if you're looking to go out and get the George T. Stagg this year, just know it's a little off profile and I think you're better off chasing if you can get last year's 2022 batch. When I did the blind, this was the bottle that hurt me the most. I really wanted this to be top 10 just because of how much time and effort it took me to chase this down and that it is my first BTAC. But when you do things blind, all the biases are taken away and at the end of the day, it just wasn't able to crack it. All right, now we're finally on to the second round where I took the top 8 bottles from each of the previous sets of 12 and put them into my top 16. This is where I started ranking the bottles, and the first one coming in at 16 is Russell's Reserve Rickhouse Camp Nelson F. Now, I rather enjoyed this bottle. However, it is one of the more expensive bottles on this list, coming in at $300. So for me personally, to justify that $300 price tag, I think it should have come a little higher on this list. Every bottle on this list above it is cheaper, but if you're a Wild Turkey fanboy, I completely understand why you would buy it. It's coming from Camp Nelson F, which is a warehouse that had some of the most sought after Russell's Reserve single barrels. But for the average person, I would recommend you just to go out and buy the traditional red label Russell Reserve single barrels coming in at 110 proof. Across the board, they are just great pours, especially at the price point of $60 and under. You really just can't beat it. All right, coming in 15th place, which was my control for the group and another Wild Turkey product, it is Rare Breed. This list is just full of limited edition, hard to get bottles. Realistically, most people out there maybe will get 1 or 2 of these. And to help people give a barometer of just how special these LE bottles are, I decided to include one of the most loved bottles in the community. This is a bottle that you can get for around $50, and it is in almost every liquor store in the country. When I first included it, I was a little worried it wouldn't make podium, and it would kind of null and void including a shelf-stable bottle to kind of help give people a reference point. So when this came in the top 15, I was just ecstatic. I love it when shelf-stable products make top 10s or beat LEs, because I think it just helps the community understand to not chase the FOMO. Just because something is advertised as limited edition or is marked up to $200 to $300 doesn't make it a great bourbon. In fact, the shelf-stable version of Rare Breed beat the limited edition Camp Nelson F. Both of these from the same exact distillery. Now, coming in at 14 is Bardstown Discovery Batch 11. This has been one of my favorite bottles all year. There might be a theme here with all these containing older age-dated Wild Turkey products, but I am absolutely in love with this bottle. To me, the Bardstown 11 is the poor man's Russell's 13. If you haven't been able to get yourself a Russell's 13 and want to know what the aroma or taste or mouthfeel might be like, this is probably the closest thing you're going to get to it. And in my area where they're coming in at around $130, I think it is a great deal and everyone should go and get on their shelf. Coming in 13th place is the 2023 Four Roses Limited Edition 135th Anniversary. I really thought this bottle would have been a lot higher in this list. If you asked me to guess my top 10, I thought this probably had a chance to make top 5. I am just a massive fan of almost every Four Roses LE, and this Four Roses limited edition included the oldest Four Roses stock they've ever put in any of their limited editions. It's a bottle that I am super excited to own, and a pour that I think people should go out and try and get at a bar, just because it is so unique and rich for a Four Roses. Hey, coming in 12th place is the 117 series Bottle and Bond, I think coming in at a 9-year age statement. I don't own this bottle, but my brother does, and he was able to donate some samples for this blind. And I'm glad he did, given the placement it ended up being in the blind. The 117 Bottle and Bond had a top 5 nose in this blind. I was in love with it. It was one of those I could just smell all day. And given the age statement on it that is 9 years old, it has me super excited for the new 1924 10-year age-stated whiskey road product coming out. Because if at 9 years it tastes and smells like this, I can't wait for what that 10-year age-stated product's gonna be like. Now, before we get to the last bottle on this list, number 11, that just missed the top 10, if you're enjoying this content, please hit that subscribe button. This has been a rather expensive video to make, and I'm trying to grow the channel so I can do more videos like this going forward. So if you can, if you're enjoying it, hit that subscribe button. I really appreciate it. Hey, and coming in 11th place is Joseph Magnus Cigar Blend Batch 162. This is the last bottle that did not make the top 10. There has been a lot of hate recently for the Joseph Magnus cigar blends. They may just be having more batch variants lately in them, but this batch, number 162, is one I am just a massive fan. Comes in at a nice proof point of 120, but given the batch variants that is out there, I am hesitant to recommend you go out and buy a Joseph Magnus cigar blend. But all I can say is this batch that I have, I'm absolutely in love with. And it's kind of shocking because I am not a big finish fan, and this is finished in 3 different types of barrels. So that was my list of bottles that came out in 2023 that just missed the cut to make it to top 10. But if you want to know what bottles did make the top 10 and beat out 13th Colony Double Oak and George C. Stagg, I'll put it here. It should come out in the next couple days. And until next time, cheers.